We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
The dominant narrative goes that Russian President Vladimir Putin was shocked to find such Ukrainian resistance, and as such has had to curtail his invasion plans. But is the world and the government underestimating Putin? And is he following his original game plan, unbeknownst to the West? Well, to dive into what's really happening and to try to answer these questions properly, we're joined by former Principal Undersecretary of Defense Controller and expert in all things defense, Mr. Dave Patterson. Thanks for coming back, Dave.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be with you.
So, Dave, initially we were told that Putin could take Ukraine in 48 hours. I remember those headlines. That was the estimation. And yet here we are almost 2 months down the line, and it seems that he's refocusing his efforts on the Donbass region. Now, I can't help but think that not only was the Western assessment wrong on multiple levels, but that we still don't really know entirely what Putin's plans are. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's always hard to determine what the motivation for the Russians are. But I think that what you were looking at...
Vodka and American blue jeans.
Yeah, well, that too. But yeah, maybe we could use that, as leverage. Stop the flow of Levi's, stop stop the Russian invasion. But you look at what Putin and his forces did, and it was based basically on the fact that they had a misperception of how easy this was going to be. They totally misconstrued the level of resistance, obviously, and they didn't understand it very much about low-intensity warfare and people fighting in their neighborhoods, which they know very well. But I think when you step back, you have to say that, this was kind of a no-plan plan. They just thought they were going to move into the Ukraine. In fact, more than a plan, I think it was what you were looking at is simply a Russian behavior.
Right. You see, the way I'm analyzing this, and I might be completely wrong here, but for those of us who have played the board game Risk, I think we're all sitting here thinking that Putin's initial jabs at Kiev were really just a distraction to give him time to shore up the Donbass region. And now that's not a new strategy by a long shot. We've seen military leaders do this for quite literally thousands of years. How is my analysis here?
Well, your analysis may be very correct, but it was pretty costly for the Russians. I mean, they've lost now roughly 25% of the force that they came into Ukraine with. Estimates are as high as 20,000 soldiers killed in roughly 57 days. The Russians lost only 15,000 between 1979 and 1989 in Afghanistan. So this has been a pretty costly effort if it was just a diversion. I'm quite confident that what Putin thought was going to happen was he was going to come in, he was going to surround Kiev, he was going to bring them to their knees, and they would, sue for peace. That has never really been a very good strategy.
What would that suing for peace tactic have looked like? Would it be that they declare independence for, or allow independence for Donetsk and Luhansk, and then a further guarantee that Ukraine won't join either NATO or the European Union?
Yeah, I think that was essentially what Putin thought was going to happen, and then little by little he would encroach in through the rest of the Ukraine, and similar responses he'd get those. I mean, and it's again. It's not so much a plan as a behavior. And you see that they've been extremely brutal in Bucha and other towns that have unfortunately fallen or come under the Russian influence. And I think you can anticipate that as a behavior throughout this conflict.
Let's talk a little about how Russia's actually getting on here then. So obviously militarily, from what we can see, that they're not doing what they expected to be able to do. So therefore, he's pulling back into Donbass, and a lot of stuff's happening with Mariupol at the moment, which is really a linchpin between the Russian-controlled areas and the rest of Ukraine. But the Western reaction to Putin so far has been predominantly sanctions, and yet those don't seem to have worked in any way, shape, or form. It seems that Putin, in his non-planned plan, as it were, he was prepared for sanctions and has sanction-proofed Russia. How long can that realistically carry on for before the isolationism really upsets the governing body in Russia?
Well, I think the problem is with the concept of sanctions. I mean, sanctions are not particularly a near-term strategy. I mean, you put on economic sanctions and they don't actually start to have an effect for quite some time. And you're only now, I mean, after 3 months of sanctions, kind of rolling sanctions, I might add, which are never very effective, because by the time you come to the next level of sanctions, they've already accommodated to the first level. And I mean, I thought we learned this in Vietnam, but apparently not. Sanctions are long-term approaches, and we haven't had a long-term yet, especially when you consider that, again, Russia thought this was going to be 3, possibly 4 days, and they'd have all of the major cities capitulating to what they wanted.
I want to talk briefly about the recent news that the EU is moving to forego Russian oil. Now, this could be a real game changer in terms of Russia being able to finance its war on the ground in Ukraine. But I think a lot of people are missing that with the EU, you'd have to have all 27 member states sign up for that. But we're not seeing complete support from all these European Union members, are we?
No, and the reason is that 43% of all of their natural gas comes from Russia, and that's a chunk of gas, as they say in Tennessee. Again, if they wanted to do this, they should have done this a year ago, and we probably wouldn't be here. But as you know, we can always look back and see all of our mistakes.
Yeah, hindsight is very much 2020. One final question for you, Dave. What we know about the Biden administration so far in terms of dealing with aggression overseas, the only real track record we have is the Afghanistan withdrawal. Now, that was, but by all metrics, that was just a disaster, a terrible disaster. Do you think people have faith that the administration has learned any lessons from its strategy in Afghanistan and is applying those lessons to Ukraine right now?
Absolutely not. I mean, this administration, the Biden administration, has a fundamentally flawed approach to foreign policy. Their approach is, if we're nice to them, they'll be nice to us. Now, there's nothing more absurd in foreign policy than that approach. And you're going to see this again, and here's a Dave prediction. You're going to see this again in North Korea. They're still holding to the idea that they can negotiate with Kim Jong-un. You can't. I mean, you have to put real pressure first on these dictators and the people who would do their neighbors harm before you kind of give them the carrot, if you ever do give them the carrot. This obviously is a problem with the Russians.
Dave Patterson, thank you ever so much.
You bet. Happy to be with you, Mark.
After this short break, we talk preferred pronouns and defending the First Amendment. Don't touch that dial. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Getting noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.